Incubator, and myself, my name is Ant. I'm from AFSA. I'm here on behalf of AFSA. If you don't know much about what we do, then you should definitely go over to afsa.org and check out and join the struggle. So we might just let Pierre and Julia start. They've got a little presentation, so they're going to share their screen and just talk about Farmer Incubator and the programs that they're running and the history and the motivation behind all that. So without further ado, please.
Hi everyone. Thanks very much, Ant. So I'm just going to share my screen. Just want to acknowledge that I'm presenting from Wurundjeri country and pay my respects. Sovereignty never ceded. Hang on a sec. Whoops, sorry. Here we go. Sorry, guys. Hang on a second. Here we go. So Pete's going to introduce what we do, and then I'll talk a bit about some work that we've got going on at the moment. Go for it, Pete.
Thanks, Julia. Thanks, Ant. I too am on Wurundjeri country, and I pay my respects to past, present, and emerging leaders, especially in the agricultural sector, but everywhere. So we are representing Farmer Incubator this evening. We're a not-for-profit based out of Melbourne, started in 2013. We're helping to grow future farmers, basically the next generation of fair food farmers. We focus on regenerative practices. We basically want to help aspiring farmers to get onto land and to grow great food. Can I grab the next slide? Thanks, Jules. One back, I think.
Oh, is it? Sorry, oops.
Drivers one. Oh, maybe the drivers one.
Oh, it's after, sorry. Here we go. Here's the drivers, and then I'll skip up.
That's cool. Yeah, so obviously there's a range of drivers that we have for the reason that we exist. Obviously there's as many people know, there's a bit of an aging population, farming population, and a declining rural community, and there's general issues with economic viability. But there is a new generation out there who are keen to farm and do so regeneratively and to provide the communities with fresh local food. Obviously, there's a range of other problems relating to environmental damage, but like I said, there is a very strong community of young farmers keen to get onto the land. But their barriers include things such as resources, capital, land, and various sort of social and isolation issues. So I'm going to grab the next slide. Thanks, Jules. A solution is what can be called a farmer incubator. This is an example sort of diagram of a particular model where there's a main farm and there are sublets to what we call incubatees, basically people who are aspiring and new farmers. And they would participate in some activities on the main farm, and then the farm itself would lease and share things that are capital intensive, such as the hothouses, sheds, tractors, machinery, cool rooms, etc. I'll grab the next slide. So we provide, our actions basically go through providing opportunities to new and aspiring farmers to work together. And we want them to gain access to mentors, resources, knowledge, and of course the confidence and the connections that we all sort of need to build and grow. Grab the next slide. Thanks, Jules. Our kind of flagship activity over the last 4 years has been the Pop-Up Garlic Farmer Program, which has been around. And essentially that's becomes part of the sort of the sharing program, where over about 9-month period, we take on sort of between a dozen to 20 participants who grow a small commercial crop of garlic, which is basically 500 cloves to 500 bulbs, and provide them with a series of workshops and skill sharing exercises, a lot of networking, and yeah, if I can grow onto that next slide, Jules. So essentially for 9 months, as I said, for 9 months, we run this program, and there's a series of 8 to 9 workshops covering things like soil management, planting, pests and diseases, marketing, harvesting. So it all kind of gets bundled up, and then each participant is assigned to or allocated a spot in one of maybe 4 or 5 spots around Melbourne, and they work collaboratively to grow each of their sets of garlic, and it's been very successful. We've generally pretty much sold out every year, and I think we've probably hit about 70 participants now. If you just want to go grab onto the next slide, thanks, Jules. Yeah, so we've had since 2015, I think that's correct. We've had about 74 participants come through, and they're generally of younger age, and a very high percentage of females, sometimes sort of up to 80%. And we've accessed land basically through peppercorn rents. People who've come to us, we've gone to them and sought access to small parcels of land. So 500 cloves basically grows on 20 square meters. So each person would get 20 square meters. So not a very large area, but of course you need access to water, and because of just the logistics of things, people would sort of rotate through quite quickly, and essentially, yeah, the outcomes have been based around looking at just seeing what we've observed as outcomes. Some of them have been intentional, some of them have not been so much intentional. Obviously, basic farming skills, but increases in confidence, and the development of networks, other people who are interested in sharing land and other people who are interested in farming together. So it's been very successful in that sense. I'll grab that next slide.
So
yeah, I'll hand over to Jules.
Yeah, so the farmer incubator model here in Australia is distinct to others over in other parts of the world, in that it's not a site-based farm, and it was either what do you do first? You set up a farm, or do you go on and actually you could try to make stuff happen? And so farmer incubator, through PUG, has been making things happen over the last few years, and testing a model for, I suppose, a lean model for incubation that is proved to be pretty good in like building those networks and accessing land, and a bit, providing toe dipping exercises for aspiring farmers or people who are interested in moving into that space who might not otherwise have had opportunities to test it out. And but we're really keen to actually set up a farmer incubator farm here in Australia. And so last year we got some funding that allowed us to do a feasibility study to test out, to better understand the Australian context and what it would look like here, whether something like that would work here, what are the needs, what's happening, what are the challenges. It gave us time to actually look in more depth at the broader international community and the work that's happening in that space and those initiatives, and using this information to inform our next steps, which is where we're at now. But just briefly, what we heard was, you know, really the major challenges of facing these people who are trying to enter the agriculture sector was primarily accessing capital. You know, a lot of farmers or new or aspiring farmers had done their math, and they found that, you know, it would take between 2 and 10 years for them to actually be viable. And what would they do in the meantime? Because a lot of them didn't have land, accessing land is the second most important thing that they identified. They had no equity to leverage that kind of capital. They also flagged that there's a really limited, here in Australia, there are limited hands-on learning and training opportunities in regenerative agriculture and formal support structures in form from the government or more broadly from the public or the philanthropic sector. And there is increased uncertainty and risks for farmers, existing farmers and new farmers, with, you know, extreme weather events that they're facing and the insecurity and the stress that causes due to climate change, of which, you know, as we all know, agriculture is a major contributor. And they're still faced with a lot of the social isolation and increased social isolation as rural communities decline, but also as new farmers who possibly aren't from rural communities and don't have their networks and communities to work within and get going, starting from, a lot of these people are coming from non-farming backgrounds and they're wanting to move into that sector. And a lot of these challenges are exacerbated by people in that position. Of course, we can't talk about, you know, agriculture in Australia and land in Australia without acknowledging, you know, the Indigenous community and their infinite amount of knowledge and wisdom in agroecology. And so there's a lot of really great work that's happening in that sector, but accessing land for them is a primary concern. The next, what we also did in looking broader afield with the research, also we look understanding the Australian context and then understanding what are some other models that are existing around the world and the initiatives that are taking place in the UK, in through Europe, Africa, and the United States. We examined closely 10 different models and interviewed people from these places, which are farm start programs, all with different focuses and I suppose financial setups, support structures, and they really helped us understand some of the key aspects that we had to consider before we moved in setting up our own farmer incubator farm. So the report for this research will be coming out and be made public or be available to the broader public in the next month or so. But in the meantime, we've decided to step into the space. We are still looking around for land and actually setting up a broader, what we call the whole hog kind of farm, where we have a place that we can, is secure and that we can work from, and set up a larger farmer incubator for a number of different incubatees. But in the meantime, we have recently got funding to do, I suppose, the next lean kind of project, which is a pilot on a couple of sites in and around Melbourne, one down in the Mornington Peninsula and one out in Keilor at Paul's place at Days Walk Farm. We're still looking around for sites down in the Mornington Peninsula for mentors as well and landholders. And the idea is really about developing and refining the farm-based incubator model so that when we're ready to launch into the whole hog, we have a better understanding of what works and what doesn't. And we'll be working with farmers and landholders, not only to set up the site, but also to inform that process. But in the lean pilot, we'll be providing the mentoring, developing the educational curriculum and designing that, and also supporting them with local distribution networks and some mobile farm start infrastructure. So we're just at the beginning of that process right now. But also important to us is also facilitating more work in this, more broadly in this space, which is why we're making this report and any kind of, like, I suppose, modelling or lessons that we have from developing these internships and so forth, making it available for people who are interested in supporting new farmers coming onto the land, so that they have something to work with, you know, that they could, they don't have to start from scratch, let's just say. And so we're working with a number of different partners, you know, Cultivate Farms, one of them, to develop a coalition and national action plan to address the key structural challenges that are facing the farmers. And so we just have a united front in that space. And that's pretty much what we've got in terms of a presentation. I hope that gives you a bit of an idea of what we do. And over to you, Ant.
Wow, amazing. There's a lot in that. I hope you can hear me. It's telling me that my internet is unstable, but I'll power on. Yeah, there's so much in that. And before we sort of broaden the discussion, I just want to introduce a term that I might accidentally just drop. So the term is FOOPL, which has become a thing in the Australian Food Sovereignty Alliance. It's FOOPL. And it's farming on other people's land. So it's, you know, share farming or co-farming or farmer incubating or all this kind of thing. So this sort of farmer incubator model is one amazing example of that. And I have a few questions about that, and I'd like to look a little bit deeper at the potential of this incubator model, and then maybe broaden the discussion to what other models are out there. But in this model, are the farmers that are, so it's sort of like an education internship crossed with the farmers have a little bit of their own sort of initiative. They can take their own initiative and make decisions about what they're doing as well. Is that how it kind of works?
Yeah, it's about, you know, supporting people to develop their own businesses. I suppose it's one step up, you know, from, like, you know, well, land sharing or sharecropping. It's, you know, where people are actually on the same property and they're utilising the land there. But in this, it is, I suppose, it's a new farmer moving into the space and having the mentor and the mentorship and support of someone who's keen to see them succeed. That's, I suppose, a really, you know, basic, like, incubation model.
Mm. Yeah, I suppose we want to, I mean, I don't want to use the too cheap a term, but a one-stop shop in the sort of sense of having everything contained within that space. We may not be able to supply all the knowledge and all the tools and so on like that, but we would certainly have the connections to provide that sort of expanded network. Because it's just the intimidation of starting something like this completely on your own with no, you know, you may have the land, you may have some tools, but, you know, there's a whole lot of other things missing. So that's essentially trying to fill that gap.
Great. And so in this model, is it intended to be a sort of like each participant does a season, whatever that might be, or is it more of a longer term project where these farmers grow over time and continue to cooperate on the property?
Well, there's two parts to it. Part A is the lean pilot that we're sort of looking at to begin with. And then there's the next pathway that we're looking at, which is the sort of the whole hog, which is that kind of that diagram that we showed at the beginning, which is, you know, pretty much, you know, holds all the content. The lean pilot would probably, at the moment, because that would be our trial system, we would be using that to maybe just run for a season, maybe 2 seasons, but for the whole hog sort of concept, I think probably, you know, there may be multiple seasons to incubate the business as well as the farmer. Like, you know, needs to be a stable business that's generating income.
I suppose it could also, you know, take any form, but the idea that it's a graduated process, that people come in with, skills that they want to develop, and a drive to start a business as a starting point, and then they're supported to do that. And to fill those skill gaps. And the idea, and traditionally within a farmer incubator, there is a time cap on how long someone's on the farmer incubator, or within the farmer incubator. So they might graduate 1, 2, or 3 years. They might be starting their own business. There are some models where they also have, they're stepping into an existing business, such as a CSA, where they're basically, the farm is already kind of like in operation. They inherit it from the previous incubatee, and they just basically learn the ropes and produce for a year or 18 months or 2 years, whatever the set time frame is. They all take different forms, and that's, the beauty of it. It can be creative on what works best for different contexts. But important to that is, and which is why we're talking to people like Sam Marwood at Cultivate Farms, and talking about what we're doing a lot, because there are a lot of landholders out there, and there are lots of land that could potentially be accessed for new farmers, and making sure they have a place to graduate to, and a place that they can set themselves up more permanently if they aren't able to buy their own place.
Yeah, great. So I'm just imagining this, the sort of, the holy grail and the end goal and the whole hog sort of thing. In that sort of scenario, are each of these farmers independent businesses that make decisions about themselves, or do they come together and make collective decisions and sell things together? I'm from a co-op, so that's how we do things. And well, yeah, that's the first part of the question. So
definitely could be like that. It seems like a great working model, and it definitely supports, I suppose, at Farmer Incubator, a big focus of our work is on the co-farming model and sharing of space and infrastructure and resources, whether it's just, through just more efficient delivery, and working together around things like that. What that looks like, it really depends on the players within there, and what are the farmers and what are they growing, and where is the overlap, and how can they potentially work together. And that's a negotiated space, like any co-farm.
Yes, yeah, there's so much potential for that. We're figuring that out here in the co-op as well, is that there's just so many potential different ways to do things together, and you just got to kind of work it out as you're going along.
Yeah. Communication's the key.
Very much so, yes. And so, on communication, you just mentioned before we came here that you were going to do some holistic decision-making stuff. What other sort of ideas or experiences have you had around communication and conflict resolution, and when you've got that many people all working together in a small space, how do you keep positive relationships?
Go Pierre.
Yeah, it's the curveball. No, I think it's, look, there's a lot of goodwill, and we should probably not bank on that goodwill for everything, but there is a remarkable amount of goodwill in the community that we've experienced so far. We have had, every year in the Pug Farmers program, we've, had a little few bits here and there that sort of come across, but everything sort of seems to get managed quite well. But I do feel like something like the holistic decision making is a good framework. But perhaps, some of the stuff would need to be worked out, in a formal conflict resolution sort of system. HDM is good for making decisions, but sometimes conflicts happen anyway. So that would be a work in progress, and definitely something we would take on quite seriously once we got to that sort of stage, I think. But so far we haven't had anything sort of blow up in our faces.
Yeah. I think really important to working in that space and working with big groups of people is having your values very clearly defined at the beginning and making sure everyone's got, it's the shared values that can connect us and help us navigate any kind of potential conflict, along with, I suppose, try to anticipate where that conflict might be and having guidelines. There's, you know, and management, you know, just ways of within PUGIF, you know, if something comes up, we have, you know, we talk with the participants of how they'd actually manage that, because they're all on different sites. So we've got 4 or 5 different sites, and every site has at least 4 to 5 different people who are working together for, you know, 9 months. And so, you know, and they're all strangers to start with, but generally friends when they leave. But, you know, stuff comes up. And it's just like, okay, well, if what stuff comes, how are you going to deal with it? And it's like, you know, talk to each other, talk to us, and then, you know, the other steps in place, you know, so you allow them, there are pathways for them to deal with that.
Plus we had one super weapon, Kat Lavers did our intro sessions and conclusion sessions. So yeah, there was great communication and good frameworks in place already. Good activities. She's fantastic.
Great, that's a good recommendation. I might get in touch with her.
Yeah,
so I'm just going to throw to a few of the questions in the chat box. We've got one here that says, from Riley, that says, would you recommend the garlic pop-up for those who want to see if farming is for them, or is it more geared towards those interested in making the transition to full-time farming or / growing a business?
Sorry, can you just repeat the first part of that question?
Would you recommend the garlic pop-up for those who want to see if farming is for them, or is it more for those who are ready to transition into full-time farming?
Definitely. If you're curious and you're not too sure, it's the perfect opportunity to try it out. Yeah, before
it's a
launching yourself.
Toe dipping exercise.
For some people, other people just but yeah, no, you don't need you have farming, you know, a huge amount of experience. It's well supported.
Yeah, most people haven't, you know, might have grown a few things in their backyard, but not much more. So it's definitely
But then, and that said, we also get people who have, you know, who've done a lot of woofing, you know, have got the experience, but are looking for a little bit more structure. So the workshops we provide, you know, are really, we've got ones that are focused on marketing. We've got focused on land access and co-farming, and then basically soils and planting and harvesting as well. So there's some specific, which are some of which are open to the public as well.
Great.
But yeah, if you want some more detail on it, then you can check out our website, just farmerincubator.org. We'll I'll put details into the chat.
Great. We've got another question here from Serena. What is the cost for the participants for people to participate, and what happens if there's a crop failure or abandonment? And I'd like to just add on to that question in the broader vision of the whole hog sort of thing. How does that whole farm pay its costs as well? You know, do the participants pay to a lease, or do they pay to, you know, to be part of the whole program for a year, or how does that work?
Well, to answer the second part of your question, we haven't got that. We haven't answered all those questions ourselves yet. We're still in the process of designing, developing that, and definitely financial viability is an important part of that, and be able to provide, I suppose, a subsidised lease and support like that to incubatees is a priority. But how do we make that happen at this stage? Because as I flagged, you know, in our research, there's limited resources and formal support structures like those you see come out from the USDA for farm starts and farmer incubators in the US, where there's a huge amount of money for new farmers and farmer incubators.
But for the program itself, for PUGIF, last year's fee was $1,150 I think there was an early bird $9.50 ticket. And that covers essentially more than 9 months. It ends up being more like 11, 9, 10, 11, almost 12 months. 8 workshops, access to the land, a few lunches, the garlic seed, of course, it's pretty important. Yeah, so it's all wrapped up in a pretty good package. You should check out the link I've just dropped in there. Should have all the detail, I think. Make sure we just had a new website update, so.
Right, and so for the sites that you're already using through the PUGOF program, do you have formal written arrangements with those, or is it more sort of relational and based on goodwill, as you said before?
Bit of both. Yeah, a bit of both. Like we had one leased site at La Trobe Uni, and they threw all the legal paperwork at us. And on the other side of the coin, Paul at Days Walk Farm, he leases part of a few rows to the program as well, and that's less than a handshake. It's just a wink. Yeah, it's pretty. It's gone everywhere between that. But essentially, in terms of somebody who was asking about failed crops, well, crop failure abandonment, it just hasn't happened because it works as a group on the one site. If we've had maybe 2 or 3 people who've pulled out for various reasons, and they've, everybody else is on the site has rallied together to continue the process and the growing. Because it's essentially they can choose to do whatever they want separately, but inevitably everybody works together, which is where the connections and the networking comes to the fore. It's pretty impressive what you see happening.
But can I just add, sorry, we do have a piece of paper that we do share with landholders. It's not necessarily like something they sign an agreement. We do offer that as an option to them, but we do kind of spell out what we see as our responsibilities and obligations and what we kind of hope for. So we go and check out sites and we, explain to them, like, people will be coming onto the land. We're hoping to run workshops. Are you open to that? What days can they come in? Can we get a tractor in here? What infrastructure can they use? Do you have a shed that they can use? And so really, making sure that they know what they're getting themselves into, and that written in a piece of paper, but also a conversation. So we go out and make sure everything's cool. And if it's not up for it, they're not up for it, which most people so far have been. Like, we just keep looking.
I'm going to just read out another one of the questions here. We've just got something from Peter wondering if something like this farm incubator could be integrated with a TAFE course or something like that and be sort of codified and recognised by the government as an educational facility or course.
Yeah, we've looked at we've briefly looked at RTOs and registered training organisations and integrating a course and integrating qualification into this. We probably feel like PUGOF is maybe not quite at that level of complexity. It's possible, but I think what we would like to maybe also do is try to integrate that into our sort of lean pilot projects of incubating an individual farmer into sort of what we would call the next step, essentially, probably from above the Pug Farmer program, is giving them the opportunity to get into doing RTO recognised education.
So working with educational organisations who are already working in that space, so we don't have to register ourselves, but it also, I suppose, facilitates change and stimulate change in the educational sector if there's a demand, and so we're working with them for change as well as they're trying to do everything ourselves.
Right. And in terms of sharing equipment, or infrastructure, I'm just wondering, that comes with a whole bunch of questions in itself. And So yeah, I'm wondering if you could speak to that a little bit. Julia, you're doing some sharing of infrastructure and equipment, right, with your mushroom stuff. So
yeah,
shed some insight.
yeah. So I've got a mushroom farm that I've set up. Well, I've got my own mushroom business, and I basically expanded and set up with another mushroom farmer as my neighbour, and we basically built the farm ourselves because we're really, it's essentially like a little co-farm. We're sharing the infrastructure, minimizing, you know, our utilization of space and resources, and working on this together. So we've got like a bit of a, you know, team vibe, you know, community around us, but even if it's just two of us. But it does, as I mentioned earlier, it is a negotiated space. You've got to keep talking and communicating and working on stuff, because especially as you get to know each other and how you work, and your, you know, your business is your priority, but also, you know, having a really healthy work environment is a really important part of that business. So, you know, there's a lot of things that are just informal, that you just, you know, it is just a chat, don't worry about it, yep, cool, or, you know, just a phone call, checking in with one another. And other things which definitely helped us is spelling out just different agreements, whether it's just the maintenance of the site and how that's going to be managed, you know, on a whiteboard, and just locking stuff in. It might seem really simplistic, but by spelling it out, you eliminate a lot of confusion by, you know, straying into grey areas where, you know, you make assumptions and stuff, you know, you're both under pressure and you're both trying to do the best you can or whatever. And so it can just alleviate a lot of stress if you've, I suppose, try to, like I said earlier, identify where the potential challenges are. And but also, you know, a big thing for us is, you know, we've got a value statement, you know, that we just worked on together about space we're kind of trying to create, so that we're both on the same page with that. And it is just, you know, we're in it for creating a really healthy work environment and looking after the planet and grow good food.
Excellent. Did you have anything to add, Pierre?
No, I think that's yeah, that covers that. Thanks.
Yeah, share. You know, we have had a few discussions here as well about sharing equipment, and I think it really just comes down to the people and the equipment. There's no one size fits all answer, as with the share farming model as well. I think there's so many different ways to do things, and it really just depends on the circumstances. Before I throw to a few more of the questions in the chat box, I just wanted to ask about something that you have both mentioned a few times and in your slide, which is mentorship. And so I just wanted, maybe you could comment on mentorship and why you think that's important, or how is that part of the story, and how is that part of the Farmer Incubator model?
Can you go, Pierre?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, you know, having the appropriate training is important, but there's just always that constant state of a specific question about a very specific thing, and having somebody on tap is pretty crucial. You just can't overstate it. Like, you know, there's just some things that you'll just never ever get out of a book, out of a course, out of anything other than somebody who's just down the road and who's run into exactly the same problem about 50 times. So yeah, it's a crucial part of it, and it also, you know, it's a part of, I think our aim is to incorporate mentors from the local community as well, so that there is that community tie into things, and a sense of you know, sometimes maybe they're going to be a little bit older than the younger farmer, who knows, but it's, you know, that there's also sort of a passing on of the baton in some ways, both in terms of the knowledge and the specificity of the area. It's probably not that much good if your mentor is 5,000 kilometers away in a completely different climate zone, you know, obviously, but, you know, there may be specifics there that are general and that can work, but you know, if you can find somebody local, that helps the community, it helps the farmer, and it helps the mentor. Jules, anything?
Yeah, just that, farming is just so context, specific, the way, you farm your fruit where you are, and people who do it, on the other side of the state, it really depends on the rainfall and the pests and, whatever else is happening in the broader landscape and the soil, type. And so nothing really beats having someone who actually understands the land. And that's why farmers are so important, and why there's a massive gap in mentors for new and aspiring farmers who are moving into this space now, is that because they're coming from non-farming backgrounds, and they don't have those traditional means to access that information as we would have previously if you'd come from a farming family, and had someone on tap who could really be there, and also who really knows the land.
Yeah, absolutely. I certainly wouldn't be here if it wasn't for my mentors over time that introduced me into farming in general, and then also my mentors and lessors here who provided that for me. I can go down to the house and knock on the door anytime and ask questions about anything to do with running an orchard. So we've got a few more questions in the chat box. If people want to ask the question for themselves, just turn your camera on and leave yourself muted, and then we can call on you if you want to ask a question. While we're waiting, if you don't want to do that, I'm just happy to read them out. Here we go. We have the first one. Oh, disappeared, maybe. Oh, Roni, there you are. Would you like to...
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, I have a question for you guys. First of all, thank you. This is super, super interesting. So I come from the kind of social entrepreneurship, social business world. And when I think of an incubator, I usually think of, impact investment, people pitching for, successful business ideas, financial viability. And I think that's what young farmers are also looking into. They want to know that if they do invest or they get some backup investment in a new farm, that it is managed to, gain some level of profit, even if it's not huge, but something that could actually get them going, especially in our kind of financial climate. So my question is, have you looked into any of these kind of channels, like impact investment, or even kind of carbon credits, or anything around that kind of area?
Yeah, so basically the business model that the new farmers develop is their own business model. So it's up to them to do it. We're not providing, if we can provide them with support to understand, I suppose, those business concepts and opportunities. I mean, that's very much going to be a part of it. Bring people in who are experts in that area and have that kind of expertise that you're talking about, but it's for them to actually utilize that information and move with it. But yeah, there are opportunities out there.
It's an interesting pitch because there's a few different angles to your question, in a sense. One is we may have farmers come to us and say, hey, what's a good business to get into? So in some ways we're kind of pitching to them. But then in another sense, I was also kind of getting a question from what you were meaning. Did you mean for us to get capital to develop our project? Which sort of...
Both.
Which of those?
Yeah, so also for you,
Yeah.
I know that you said you are a not-for-profit, but maybe that's not necessarily the best way to go in that kind of area. But also in most incubators or even accelerators that I know from the social business area, participants are then they have the opportunity to pitch to impact investors or to even network with these kind of opportunities. So I'm just wondering if you have those kind of channels or those networks available.
Yeah, well, I mean, we did some work with the Difference Incubator in Melbourne, and yeah, there are opportunities through that, and the way they organise pitch sessions and stuff like that. So yeah, there's a lot of potential and a lot of different avenues there, and there's a lot more interest in regenerative ag now than there has been ever. Obviously, well,
yeah,
shouldn't be, but so there's things that are developing very quickly.
Yeah. We've talked to people who we've definitely, there's people who are keen to support us in that space. So the conversations are happening.
Thanks.
No worries. Thanks for your question.
Sure thing.
Indeed, thanks for your question. If anyone else wants to ask their question, just turn on your camera and we'll call on you. Otherwise, we'll go to the chat box. We've got a question here that says, is there much coordinated advocacy going on for greater government investment into young farmers or programs like Farmer Incubator? Before I throw to you two, I might just, this might be a good time to comment on the Australian Food Sovereignty Alliance, and we have, or we are in the process of setting up a sort of a FOOPL committee with some funding, and so that could be a potential direction for us to work in. So that could be part of the project. So currently what we're doing initially is just collecting a whole bunch of different models of share farming, and sort of asking people to share their official agreements that they have, if they have that, or just an explanation of how their co-farming works or how their FOOPL works. But that could totally be part of that project, is to lobby government for more funding in this. But what about you two? Does Farmer Incubator, or is there any part of what you're doing so far that's kind of advocacy based?
Traditionally, that's not really a space that we've done much in. We've really concentrated our energy. It was a really small team of volunteers, like about 6 people. It is just about getting people, on the land and getting practical skills and all that kind of stuff. So it's been quite focused on that. But we have identified through this research the need or an opportunity through people we're speaking to and working with, groups like AFSA and Open Food Network and Cultivating Farms and, OriCorp and a bunch of others who are kind of also working to build change in this space and actually having a bit more of a coordinated front. So yeah, I do think we haven't so far, but it's definitely something we're keen to contribute to when we can.
Yeah, but it does seem like it's a bit of an immature field in Australia that's got a lot of opportunity for it. As a massive agricultural producer, and yeah, there's lots of, a few times I wish I was in the US, because there is certainly more money going into this sort of stuff in the US, but it's a little bit of a blank slate, but there's lots of opportunity, I think, in Australia.
And there has also just been a couple of rounds of funding specifically for the artisanal ag sector, which is what the state government likes to call it. And I'm sure, correct me if I'm wrong, Tam, who is the president of AFSA and in the audience, but I think that was as a result of advocacy by AFSA and potentially partner organisations as well. So we've got another question here from Monica from Cobargo. She has asked, or they have asked, have you guys looked into community title? Leases often don't last for young farmers and security of tenure would be amazing. Renting to buy on community title would be great. Do you know anything about it?
No, just Googled it right then. It sounds pretty interesting though. Yeah, it sounds pretty interesting. Look, whatever innovations there are in this sort of stuff is definitely is an opportunity.
Over in the States, we've got land trusts have been set up. So securing agricultural land for new farmers, but also making sure it's not at risk of development. So something like similar to that as well. It would, go a long way to providing, security of tenure to new farmers, which is, as you so rightly put, it's a massive stressor if you're just investing so much time and energy into a place that you have you've only got a leasehold on and could potentially be moved on from. But yeah, that sounds really interesting. Definitely look into it. If you've got any more information, please share.
Yeah, that is a big issue, is that security question, and also balancing the security against how much of a commitment it is for a new farmer.
Mm-hmm.
So what we did here, how we solved that, which was generous from our lessors, is that we have a 9-year lease, basically, that has options every 3 years. So we have potentially quite a bit of security and enough to make some decent investments in the property. But also it wasn't too confronting for the different businesses to sign up to the cooperative, because, you know, there's still the option at 3 and 6 years to part ways if you need to.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a really great model. Yeah.
We last year, just pitching to or mentioning Antu, that you last year we did a co-farming. Part of our PUGIV program was having a co-farming session at your place, and fingers crossed we run the PUGIV program next year. But we, as part of that program, we would run independent workshops that were open to the public. So keep an eye out for those probably this time next year, because we would like to come back to Harcourt.
Yes, we'd love to do that again for sure. So we've got another question from Annalise. They have said, there's lots of jobs that support traditional farms like agronomists, vets, insurance, feed technicians, lawyers, etc. Do you guys see the next gen of new farmers needing a parallel next gen of these non-farming roles? I'm not sure I understand that question, but...
I do. I definitely do. Definitely need some legal help. Yeah. Look, there's lots of things. You know, really interesting new ways of approaching things in the next generation economy. But specifically to that, yeah, I can't say anything specifically to any of those particular. But yeah, I mean, we obviously need people on our advisory boards and things like that who can help advise. And then, yeah, whenever we do need people in the various areas, you know, somebody who has come from something in an innovative area and maybe not the tried and tested and slightly failed system, then that would be great.
Great. We've only got a few minutes left, so if there's any burning questions, please do turn your camera on or pop them into the chat box there. Otherwise, maybe just for the last few minutes, you could... Oh, we have a camera. Monica, would you like to ask a question? You are still muted, so you need to unmute yourself. No, not happening. Oh, yeah.
There we go.
There we go.
In Cobago in November, we were, as a response to the bushfire regeneration and some of the stuff we've just talked about as well, we're trying to organize a co-farming speed date. And the idea is to try and flush out who has farms that's interested in co-farming, so who owns land, who is in the process of maybe looking to buy land, who's interested in co-farming, and who maybe doesn't have the finances to buy land, but is looking to, I guess, incubate or make a go of, like they would be interested in leasing. Just wondering if you guys have any thoughts on, has anybody ever done that before, and how do you approach matching people who are going to host as well as people who are going to incubate?
It's a very good question. It is really challenging, and it basically boils down to personalities a lot of the time. So I suppose, I mean, we're in the process of developing those kind of parameters and identifying what might work. But it's a tricky. I don't think there's any one way, and I would probably say if you're not. I think it's enough to basically provide the opportunity for people to meet and talk and then step back. If that's what you're trying to do, is to facilitate connections in that area. And I would probably not try to be do too much more than that, because then you're responsible for those relationships and then working on and so forth, and you're really digging yourself in, embedding yourself into a much more complex process, possibly providing them, with, I mean, the Future Feeders is a group run by Joel Orchard, who also does Young Farmers Connect, and he provides, flags, opportunities, and same with Cultivate Farms of, there's a farm opportunity here. Is there a young farmer out there, or an aspiring farmer, or someone who wants to be, apply? And basically they make the connection, and then that's the relationship is for them to manage. If you know what I mean, like you're facilitating that relationship, but you're not responsible for it. So in our case,
perfectly.
Sorry, go on.
Like speed dating, like the speed dating analogy is perfect. You don't take any account for their relationship. You just match them together and let them sort it out. But you give them the forum to come in. It's a great concept. I really like it.
Yeah, it's really good. Does that answer your question? Kind of.
It does. Thank you. Yes.
Great.
Right. And so there's a community, for people that don't know, there is a community called Deep Winter Agrarians, and it is, I guess, a community for small-scale regenerative farmers and their allies. And we get together once a year, or we have in the past, and that kind of somewhat fills that role as well. That I found internships through that community. And we actually did one year do an exercise that we called speed dating, where we literally stood in two circles and went around and introduced ourselves very quickly to each other. And I'm sure that there were connections made from that. Jilly, is it Jilly there? Yeah, Jilly, do you have a question?
No, I don't. I was just trying to participate with my face.
Excellent, welcome. Hello, Julie. Nice to see you.
There was one quick question there, and sorry, I know there was any plans to expand out of Victoria to other parts of Oz. Not at this stage, but we're open to sharing the platform and the processes that we use to develop it. So if anybody wants to take on another PUGIF program, or wants to look at what else we do, there will be a report coming out in the next few months, just going over the research that we went through earlier.
Yeah, but also just get in touch, reach out. If you're thinking you're doing something similar, we're always really keen to share whatever knowledge we have, and yeah, make stuff happen.
Amazing. That's really great. Did you have something else to add then, Per?
Just there was a question from Blake, but I'm not sure if you've got time.
We are out of time. Maybe I might leave that for now so that we don't drag on for too long. Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming. Thank you to Julia and Pierre for sharing all of your knowledge.
Pleasure.
Yeah, I hope that these conversations can continue and everyone feels inspired to create new projects and lobby the government and create change.
Yeah. Thanks so much for giving us a chance to have a chat about it.
Yeah.
Really good. You're
Really
doing great work.
it. Thanks, guys.
No worries.
Cheers, and
Thanks
everyone.
And if you want any more information on AFSA, you can check out the website there.
Yeah. Do you want to, maybe we'll try and grab some of those, if there are any other questions in that list, and we can have a look through, and anyone we can answer, we'll share it with you. Or do you want to take a cut and paste of it, Pierre, before we close?
I can try.
You can save the chat with the 3 dots.
I think it did.
Oh, there we go. Can you?
Oh, you can too. Amazing. I think Amita will be all of that. So
Nice one. We'll try and answer any outstanding questions. But yeah, reach out, guys.
Yeah, by all means.
Great.
Cheers. Thanks. Have a
Thanks,
great
Anne.
evening. Nice one. Thank you.
Yeah.